Вітаю, shalom. Good evening, dear friends. Ambassador Markarova, Mr. Temerty, Mr. Lévy, Congressman. It's a great honor for me to be here today at the awarding of the Metropolitan Andrey Sheptytsky Medal. This medal, presented by the Jewish Confederation of Ukraine and the Ukrainian Jewish Encounter, is awarded to those who have made a significant contribution of development of friendly relations between the Ukrainian and Jewish peoples. The Capitol in Washington, D.C. was untraditionally chosen as the venue for today's ceremony. With this, we want once again to draw the attention of our American friends to the importance of continuation of support of the United States for both Ukraine and Israel. On the obverse of the Sheptytsky Medal is a quote from the Psalms. Who will rise up for me against the evildoers? Who will stand up for me against the workers of iniquity? During World War II, Metropolitan of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, Andrey Sheptytsky, stood up against those committing iniquity and evil. He wasn't afraid to personally shelter Jews in his residence. Churches and monasteries in Western Ukraine were also involved in rescuing Jews. The exact number of people saved by Sheptytsky is unknown, but it is in the hundreds, maybe thousands. Sheptytsky wasn't afraid to protest the mass killings of Jews in Ukraine to SS Reichsführer Himmler. And he wrote to Pope Pius XII, "This is the complete degradation of humanity." More than 80 years later, the Metropolitan's words are still relevant. Only now they apply to the events in both Ukraine and Israel. This is the complete degradation of humanity. Today, we are awarding the Metropolitan Andrey Sheptytsky Medal to the outstanding contemporary Ukrainian poet Lina Kostenko and Bernard-Henri Lévy, the globally recognized French philosopher, writer, and director, one of the leading intellectuals of the West. Two legends of global stature, two undeniable moral authorities whose names are known to millions around the world. In the 60s, in the Soviet Union, one had to be very brave to openly advocate for the rights of different peoples to self-identity and the freedom to choose their country of residence, Jews in particular. Lina Kostenko did exactly that. My sincere respect, Lina Vasilyevna, especially for your memorization of the victims of Babin Yar, the site of the largest mass shootings of Jews during the Holocaust. Bernard-Henri Lévy came to Ukraine in 2014 to support Ukrainians who defended their right to be free on the Maidan. He witnessed the beginning of Russian-Ukrainian war. Since then, Mr. Lévy has been a frequent guest in Ukraine. During the Russian invasion, he has already made 3 films about this senseless and insane war. The first film was set to be released this summer. We look forward to it. He was in Israel the very next day after the Hamas attack in October 2023, also to tell the world the truth about the tragedy that occurred. Lina Kostenko, Bernard Lévy, and Andrey Sheptytsky are united by one common and valuable quality, the courage to speak the truth about human rights in general and about the rights of the Ukrainian and Jewish peoples in particular. This is why we have decided to honor them today with the Metropolitan Andrey Sheptytsky Medal for their creativity and personal heroism, which unite Ukrainians and Jews and rally the world to their defense. Thank you very much. Slava Ukraini. Am Israel Chai. Dear friends, I would like to take the floor, the Congressman, a great supporter of Ukraine, Steny, please.
Well, thank you very much. And I want to thank our ambassador, who I've gotten to know pretty well. I did not put this pin on, or you know this because you see me every day. I did not put this pin on today because I was speaking here. I have worn this pin the first thing I do every morning. I guess I brush my teeth, do some other things, kept my suit jacket, and the first thing I do is put on this pin. I do that because I think what is happening in Ukraine is one of the most important things happening in the world and will dictate whether or not we have international law and some degree of international stability. And we will have that if we win. And winning means that we follow the agreement of 1994. It simply said, you give us the nukes and we'll let you alone. We gave them the nukes and they lied. And so here we are. But we're here on a happy occasion to recognize one, I suppose, will be on the screen, but Monsieur Lévy is here. Congratulations for receiving this award, but much more for all you have done to merit the award. Rabbi Bleich, thank you, sir, for being here. We pray for you, we think of you, and we fight for you and your country. Mark Levin, my dear, dear friend. Mark Levin and I started out a long time ago. He was very young. I was middle-aged then, working on behalf of refuseniks, working on behalf of the Helsinki Final Act and its principles, working so that people in the Soviet Union could go where they wanted to go. A fight that we won, but we are risking losing what we won. Boris Lozhkin, president of the Jewish Confederation of Ukraine. Is that you, Boris? Okay. I was introduced to him, but I didn't get the name, but here it is on paper. So it always helped to have it on paper. Thank you very much for your leadership. And the Metropolitan Archbishop of Ukrainian Catholic Archdiocese of Philadelphia is here. Where are you, sir? Well, then I don't have to pronounce his name. That's the good news. The bad news, he wasn't here. I'm pleased to stand with a community devoted to shared principles of liberty, democracy, and human rights and international law. That is what is at stake in Ukraine today. And that is what the ambassador fights for every day in our country. Oksana has become a good friend. But more than that, someone whom I greatly respect as a symbol of a people that has shown such great courage, conviction, and love of country. Those are the principles Andrey Sheptytsky stood for 8 decades ago. And they are the principles that Ukraine is defending today, not only on behalf of themselves, but on behalf of all of us. Your theme this evening is moral courage in a divided world. I first saw Ukrainians display that moral courage when I was chair of the U.S. Helsinki Commission in the waning years of the Cold War. I became chair of the Helsinki Commission in 1985. Donnie Pacell from Florida had been chairman for 8 years prior to that. He then became chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, and I became chairman of the Helsinki Commission. And I used to tell him, Donnie, for 8 years, and I was chairman. Has he come? I used to tell Donnie, for 8 years you were chairman of the Helsinki Commission. I become chairman, and the Soviet Union falls. I, of course, did not take credit for that. I saw the courage in the sunken faces of Lev and Ina Albert, 2 Ukrainian refuseniks from Kyiv. When I visited them in the Soviet Union in 1987, they were on a 42nd day of a hunger strike to protest of being denied the right to emigrate to Israel after 10 years of waiting. Their bodies were weak, but their resolve was stronger than ever. I also remember the moral courage of Josip Tureli, a Ukrainian Catholic activist and member of Ukraine's Helsinki group, who testified before our commission here on Capitol Hill that same year. At that time, the Ukrainian Catholic Church was the largest banned denomination in the Soviet Union. When Josip was released in 1987 after 23 years in Soviet gulags and 9 escape attempts, he was the longest-serving prisoner of conscience known in the Soviet Union. When I say known in the Soviet Union, I would go to the Soviet Union. I was just in my 6th year in the Congress. I'm now in my 44th year in the Congress. And I would meet people who were having the courage to demonstrate and to seek their freedom. And I said, you know, I hope nobody's following me, because I don't want you to be outed by me. And their response was, no, we want to be known to the world because that makes us safer. It's the anonymous who are at such risk. And that's why we all need to speak up. The struggles people in Ukraine experienced back then are sadly not so different from the struggles today. I was first in Kyiv in 1987. Jim Wright was Speaker of the House, and I visited Kyiv. And I was carrying with me, Mark, you may remember this, I was carrying with me some items, cigarettes and some other things that I took to an apartment. And I rode on the subway, and I was terrified that I was going to be arrested at some point in time in that trip. And I knocked on the door of an apartment that I was told, and I gave this material. Why? Because her son was in jail. And he used those cigarettes and other items that were in that packet to get some relief from the oppressor. The Russian occupiers have cracked down on numerous religious denominations, including the Ukrainian Catholic Church, and disappeared, tortured, and executed clergy members. At least 20,000 Ukrainian children have now been abducted. At least 20,000 have now been abducted from their families and taken into Russia. That, of course, is a war crime. And the perpetrators of those war crimes need to be held accountable. In Bucha and beyond, the Russians have butchered an untold number of civilians. Just as chilling are these crimes is the fact that the Trump administration has stopped our investigation into them. In other words, they may be left anonymous in a world that needs to know the truth, in a world that needs to hold accountable the perpetrators of those acts. Donald Trump tries and fails to appease Putin, just as Neville Chamberlain tried and failed to appease Hitler. This is not a partisan speech. This is the reality when you say the price of peace may be giving up eastern Ukraine. The price of peace may be Crimea. My friends, my belief is the failure of the West to respond in 2014 effectively to the taking of Crimea, the stealing of Crimea, is the mother of this war in which we are now involved. Too many people in this administration are parroting Putin's propaganda, are giving up before they start. The president sadly rejects Ukraine's aspirations to join NATO. We did not ask Putin whether Finland could join NATO. We did not ask Putin whether Sweden could join NATO. There is no reason in the world why we ask Putin, can Ukraine join NATO? That is their greatest security. In fact, we have apparently shrugged our shoulders as the defenders of democracy. John Kennedy said we would pay any price, bear any burden to defend freedom here and around the world. Freedom is at risk of being destroyed, not only in Ukraine, if we lose this war. And I say we, because we're in this together. The Wall Street Journal criticized me when I gave a speech on the floor, and I said, we're at war with Russia. And they said, of course, you're not at war, because we haven't declared war. But we have given treasure, and we have given great support. And I urge President Trump, Secretary Rubio, the Secretary of Defense, to keep the faith with freedom, keep the faith with democracy, keep the faith with international law. And if you do that, you will keep the faith with Ukraine. Nothing, no guarantees for Ukraine's security, sovereignty, and democracy. That is what we want. Is it any surprise to any of us in this room that Putin has not said, okay, we'll have a long-term ceasefire, we'll negotiate, and we're not going to get into the question of NATO? The absurd premise that Putin tries to sell the world community is that somehow he is afraid of NATO nations that will be invaded. And so, unfortunately, our president says it was Zelensky and Ukraine who invaded. How absurd, how patently untruthful, how openly the world disdained that observation, and correctly. Putin drags his feet in negotiations, and the president now suggests that America may just walk away from the war altogether. I'm bored. I'm going to walk away. If we lose this war, if Ukraine gives up its sovereignty and its borders, I will tell you, I was just in Denmark. I was just in Sweden. I was just in the Netherlands. They believe that if that happens, they are next. They are next. This is not a war for Ukraine alone. This is a war for peace and safety and security all along the border between Russia and the free world. That's what's at stake here. That's why I urge my colleagues to stand up and to vote. Oksana, as you know, there have been some 12 votes specifically regarding Ukraine and funding and support for Ukraine. On those 12 votes, we had as high as 85%. We averaged 80% on every one of those 12 votes in the Congress of the United States to support Ukraine. 80% of the Congress said, we are for Ukraine, we are for its freedom, we want to see it win its fight, because it's our fight. My friend that I've talked about, Ambassador Markarova, at every opportunity makes the case persuasively for Ukraine. Now, I feel sadly, and I know you're going to think this is a very partisan speech, but I am very sad. I was in Denmark. We had a G5 Air Force plane. We were going to fly down to Kyiv and meet Zelensky shortly after the election. A part broke on the plane, and we didn't get there, but I talked to him for 45 minutes from the hotel in Denmark. Zelensky is paying the price for his integrity. Hear me. This is a personal issue. By the way, I don't know whether you saw that the leader of El Salvador came to the White House just a few days ago. I don't know how many of you saw that on television, but when I saw him, I thought to myself, he's dressed remarkably like Zelensky. nobody said anything that he was disrespecting by his dress the President of the United States. I want to thank you, Monsieur. I don't know Lina Kostenko, this famous poetess who's perhaps going to be on the screen in just a few minutes if I shut up. But I do know that this award represents a kindred spirit who cares as deeply as America has cared, still cares. That 80% vote shows that we still care and we are still there for Ukraine. I want to thank you both for your advocacy on behalf of not only Ukraine, but freedom itself, because that's what's at stake. Not just Ukraine. As important as Ukraine is, it is a much, much bigger thing we confront. And that is the West willing to stand up and fight for freedom? Are we willing to pay any price, bear any burden to defend freedom here and in Ukraine and around the world? The two of you remind me of those brave dissidents that I spoke to in the Soviet Union, in Russia, and in Kyiv, and in Leningrad, now St. Petersburg. Brave people who were willing to stand up to substantial power. How brave the Ukrainian people have been. How proud we should all be of their courage, of their commitment. I'll leave you with an opening stanza of a poem from those dissidents, Vasil Stus. He was a renowned Ukrainian poet himself and members of Ukraine's Helsinki group. And I understand he was a friend of Lina's. I honored him on the House floor shortly after he died in a Soviet gulag in 1985. There are videos of Ukrainian soldiers reading this poem aloud under Russian artillery fire. I hope we too, all of us, can find the strength, the courage, and inspiration in these words as we stay the course to victory. I want all of you to know that I met with the Prime Minister of the Netherlands, the Prime Minister of Denmark. By the way, my father was born in Copenhagen, so I'm half European. Actually, I'm all European because my mother was Scotch-English. Like all Americans, we're somebody else's country as well. The opening line in that poem goes, endure. Endure. Endurance hones you, steals your spirit. So endure. Endure. So to Ukraine, I say endure. To the President of the United States, I say endure. To the House of Representatives and the United States Senate, I say endure. And to all of you who, like me, may not wear the flag on your lapel, but you wear Ukraine in your heart, because Ukraine is all of us. And because that is so, we must ensure that Ukraine endures, so that democracy, freedom, international law, human rights, decency, and hope can live among us. Thank you very much.
Now I want to welcome Ambassador of Ukraine, Oksana Markarova.
Thank you. Thank you, dear Boris. Dear, or shall I call you President Lozhkin, President of the Confederation, dear Chairman Temerty, all the Reverend Fathers we have here with us, Your Eminence, Metropolitan Andrey, and also Rabbi Bleich, so many congressmen and congresswomen who are with us today. We really appreciate the bipartisan support, and we would not be where we are as the country without very strong bipartisan support, and we really count on it. Dear friends from Ukrainian Hromada, from Ukrainian diaspora, all the members of the press, all the members of think tanks. I see so many. I can go on and on and on, calling on all the people. But thank you, dear friends, for being here, and it's an honor for me that you have invited me to attend this very important event. This is a very special ceremony, a ceremony in which we really say our sincere respect and appreciation to two remarkable individuals, to the recipients of 2025 Metropolitan Andrey Sheptytsky Medal. Now, launched in 2012 by the Jewish Confederation of Ukraine, this award really honors every year the memory of Andrei Sheptytsky, who has been a spiritual leader for so many of us. He was the priest of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, but I know so many of the Christians and non-Christians also really respect him as an individual. He was tirelessly working to support everyone in Ukraine and to uplift the spirits of Ukrainians since 1901 until 1944 when he died. He protested against Germany's murderous policies towards everyone, and especially towards Jewish people in Ukraine. He himself saved so many, as Boris already said, hundreds or maybe thousands of Jewish Ukrainians. And he stands for all of us as the eternal symbol of ethical and moral leadership, in addition to spiritual leadership. This year, the selection committee is bestowing this award on two not only distinguished individuals, but also people who I think everyone in Ukraine admire. I am yet to find a person who would have a different opinion about a very famous poet. Everyone knows Lina Kostenko as a poetess, but also journalist, writer, publisher. She's the dissident during the Soviet times, and a remarkable woman and a role model for so many Ukrainian women. But also renowned French philosopher and filmmaker, publicist, well, I would say public intellectual, but I'm also proud to say my dear friend, Bernard-Henri Lévy. Now, there is a phrase, a famous line from Lina Kostenko's poetry: "Destiny does not smile at those who are slaves at heart." And this is what we all are fighting for on a daily basis, for freedom to be who we are, for freedom to live in our own country, for freedom to believe in what we want to believe in, for freedom to just be peaceful Ukrainians of all nationalities, of all faiths, of all descents, to live in our own country. The two living legends are truly iconic cultural figures in Ukraine, in France, and in the world. The leading representative of Ukraine dissident movement in 60s, Lina Kostenko, opposed the Soviet regime and refused to give into ideological demands of communist censorship. It was difficult. You could not be anything during the Soviet times if you didn't just write what the party wanted you to write. But she could not do that. She never was interested in stated words from the communist parties, not in the declarations. She remained true to her principles and to her poetic voice. And that voice in turbulent times like now is really helping us, together with her wisdom and emotional depth, continuing the moral guidance. And we just recently celebrated her birthday. And in her wise age, she's more energetic and active than so many of us, and gives us really the hope on how we have to move forward. Back in 2015, when Russia made the first attempt into taking all Ukraine and illegally annexed Crimea and occupied parts of Donetsk and Lugansk, Lina Kostenko supported the cultural project which was called the Second Ato Front. And she sent humanitarian and poetry collections. She worked a lot to support people on the front lines and everywhere. In February 2022, when Kyiv was bombed by the Russian missiles and drones, she did not go to the bomb shelter a single time, against the best advices of everyone who loved her. And she remembered later, I belong to the generation that survived World War II. And those missile attacks at 4 a.m., I remember them vividly from my childhood. These moments were familiar, only more terrifying, and I pulled myself together and I started writing no matter what comes next. And others did their part. Everyone in his or her own profession. People did what they could. And they managed so much to achieve. I'm also glad that Bernard-Henri, who is a very special friend, as I said, for many in Ukraine, for president, and for so many Ukrainians on the front lines, is personally in attendance today. And thank you for your tireless efforts. Bernard was in Kyiv during the Revolution of Dignity in 2014, and since 2022, I don't know how many times you already visited. Definitely, you are more often than me in Kyiv, to work on tirelessly documenting this war. His three documentaries, you probably have seen some of them, or maybe all of them, like us. First is called Why Ukraine. Second is Slava Ukraini. And then the third one is With Ukraine in Heart. He just completed, can I say completed already? His fourth film, because Notre Guerre, Our War, and with only one message to the world: freedom is not free. And Ukraine is fighting for freedom of everyone, for our freedom, for American freedom, for European freedom, for Japanese freedom, for everyone who believe in the values on which also this great country is founded on. And today when we speak here on 1162nd day of the beginning of Russia full out attack against Ukraine, I would like to thank Lina Kostenko and Bernard-Henri Lévy for staying the course with us, for being vocal advocates for freedom, for being true patriots. Lina Kostenko of Ukraine, you've been patriot of France, but that does not stop you from being patriots of freedom. Now, thanking the sacrifice, I would like to thank to Chairman Temerty and to Boris Lozhkin for this remarkable project that you have together, for this award, and for tireless work of both Confederation and the Jewish Encounter, because this is very important for us in Ukraine. I don't know whether we can separate fully the Jewish people and Ukrainian people in Ukraine. We always lived not just peacefully together, but really close with each other. And there were different stories in our history, but our history now is all the same. We all want peace. We all tirelessly work with peace with all of our friends and allies. And I'm coming here actually from the Treasury Department, where with First Vice Prime Minister, we just signed, the First Vice Prime Minister with Secretary Bassent, the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. And we are working tirelessly. We all are praying for peace, for just and lasting peace. We all pray for President Trump to be effective in his initiatives. And as you know, President Zelensky in Ukraine agreed right away to the full and comprehensive ceasefire. And we have to double down to make sure that Russia agrees to that too. So God bless America for all the support. God bless all Americans for staying together with us. Slava Ukraini. And I look forward to hearing all the wonderful presentations and especially our awardees today. Thank you for having me.
Dear friends, I am glad to introduce our esteemed partner, James Temerty, chairman of Ukrainian Jewish Encounter, our partner in this ceremony and this award. James.
Before I turn to my prepared remarks, I can't help but acknowledge someone in the room that's very dear to me, because we wouldn't be here if it were not for a certain rabbi that's in this room. There may be more than one rabbi in this room, but this particular rabbi is the one who conceived of the Sheptytsky Medal. And it came about, if you don't mind, Rabbi Bleich, it's such a pleasure to see you. It's been so many years. It came about, in my view, this way. Adrian and I were in Kyiv doing our Ukrainian Jewish Encounter work, and we met with We met with Metropolitan Hussar, you all recall. He was the Metropolitan of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church. And he gave us an idea. We said, oh, what a wonderful idea. It was an idea about how the Polish people and the Ukrainian people managed to reconcile things. So Adrian and I said, we got to talk to the rabbi. Let's talk to the rabbi. So we showed up to visit with the rabbi in his synagogue upstairs, and we put this idea forward. I won't go into the idea. It's not necessary. Well, it wasn't going to work. It was too idealistic. It was not going to work. But our expressions were expressions of disappointment, and Rabbi Bleich could see this clearly. And as we left, we knew he was probably more disappointed than we were. And so it wasn't long after that he came to me and he said, look at this, Jim, look at this. And he had gone to Labortas, a famous jewelry shop in Kyiv, and produced this beautiful medal of Andrey Sheptytsky, and told me of the vision of awarding this medal. And so here we are. There have been 4 medals given out, and today there will be 2 more. And none of that would have happened if it had not been for your vision. So we're deeply indebted, and thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, Vladiko Evstrati, distinguished guests, U.S. lawmakers, members of the Ukrainian diaspora. I don't know why this doesn't include Jewish diaspora. So Jewish diaspora, interfaith leaders, and friends who are here. On behalf of the Ukrainian Jewish Encounter, I am deeply honored to welcome you to the 2025 Sheptytsky Awards ceremony. Tonight we gather to celebrate moral courage in a divided world, a theme that resonates profoundly in these challenging times. As the chairman of the Ukrainian Jewish Encounter, I am proud of our mission to build bridges between Ukrainian and Jewish communities, 2 peoples whose histories are intertwined through shared resilience, shared suffering, and shared aspirations for a better future. Inspired by the legacy of Metropolitan Andrey Sheptytsky, who risked his life to protect Jewish lives during the Holocaust, UJE fosters dialogue, mutual understanding, and trust. From educational programs to cultural initiatives, we work to heal historical wounds and celebrate the rich contributions of both communities. Tonight, we honor 2 extraordinary individuals, Bernard-Henri Lévy and of Lina Kostenko, whose moral courage embodies Sheptytsky's spirit. Through their words and actions, they have confronted division, defended human dignity, and inspired unity across cultures and nations. Their stories remind us that courage, whether in the face of oppression or in the pursuit of truth, can light the way toward reconciliation and hope. This ceremony, held here in the heart of American democracy, is a testament to the power of shared values. Our lawmakers present, your support for Ukraine and for intercommunity dialogue strengthens all of us. To the Ukrainian diaspora and Jewish community leaders, your presence honors the legacy of those who came before us. And to our interfaith partners, your commitments to compassion towards the minors. Your commitment to compassion mirrors Sheptytsky's vision. As we proceed, let us reflect on the acts of moral courage that continue to shape a more just world. May this evening inspire us to build bridges, to stand firm in our principles, and to carry forward the legacy of Metropolitan Sheptytsky. Thank you for joining us, and enjoy the rest of the ceremony.
Dear friends, now I am happy to introduce our awardee, Bernard-Henri Lévy, philosopher, writer, and director, one of the leading intellectuals of this world. And James, let's start the first part of our ceremony. Please come here, Bernard. Lina, and can you show this beautiful medal? I think you can take the medal and let's... Okay. You know?
Could you please kindly sit down? You're blocking the live production. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bernard, floor is yours.
My dear Boris, my dear James, my dear friend, Ambassador Markarova, Mrs. and Mr. Ambassadors, Congressmen, dear rabbis, dear bishops, dear Metropolitan, dear Ukrainian and American friends. First of all, I must tell you how moved I am and how honored I am to share this great medal and this award with Lina Kostenko. For me, she is more than a poet. She is, as you well know, maybe better than me, she is the embodiment, the living embodiment of the soul of Ukraine. In Ukraine, for me, when I first stepped into Ukraine, a long time ago, there was Taras Shevchenko in the past, and there was Lina Kostenko in the present. And Lina Kostenko, for me, is the proof that the spirit of Ukraine, the soul of Ukraine, can be harmed, can be wounded, but cannot be destroyed, and survives in spite of all aggressions and every possible barbarity. She is a proof of that. And for me, it's a great emotion to share this floor virtually with her. I want to tell you also how proud I am to receive this Andrey Sheptytsky Medal. For a Jew and for a committed Jew, it means a lot. It means the world. As a Jew, I am well aware that the history of Ukraine and the Jews, like the history of Russia and the Jews, like the history of Poland and the Jews, like the history of France and the Jews, has not always been a history of love and roses, of course. It has its part of darkness. But Andrey Sheptytsky is more than a bridge. He's a bond. He's a bond of flesh, of soul, of life, and of hope between the Jews and Ukraine. There are other bonds between the Jews and Ukraine. The president of Ukraine today, Volodymyr Zelensky, is one of these bonds. He is a Jew. His family paid a huge price to Holocaust. And he is the best elected president, not only in Ukraine, but in the West. You have those who conceived and built the Babi Yar Memorial, which I had the honor to inaugurate in 2016 in the name of the President of France, are also the embodiment of this bond between Jews and Ukraine. By the way, the veterans of the Israeli army, who are fighting at this very moment on the soil of Ukraine, you have some, even a lot. I know them. I shared time with them. I filmed them, are another bond. Anatoly Shapiro, the Ukrainian man who was the first one to enter in Auschwitz and to liberate Auschwitz, Anatoly Shapiro, who was in a Red Army tank, member of the first Ukrainian front, and who was the one who liberated Auschwitz, is another bond between the Jewish people and the Ukrainian people, and between the Ukrainian Jews and the non-Jewish Ukrainians. But of course, Andrey Sheptytsky, among all those names, is certainly the most saint, and for me, the one whose memory is the most holy, I would say. I visited the St. George Cathedral in Lviv, where he did hide in the caves, as well as in his own home, just in front, across the street of the cathedral. Hundreds, maybe thousands of Jews. For sure, hundreds of Jewish children and dozens of rabbis. This Metropolitan who wrote to the Pope, Pie XII, in November 1942, this letter, and then this apostolic letter sent to Urbi et Orbi in the world, named "Thou Will Not Kill," which was directly addressed to the Nazis, who was directly addressed to the world, who was so reluctant to recognize the extent of the crime. This Metropolitan, for me, is an example, of course, of bravery, of spiritual dignity, but also of this unbreakable bond, in spite of the darkness, between Ukraine and the Jews, between Ukraine and her Jews. For this reason, for me, it's really, and I mean my words, I did not prepare any speech, I speak with my heart. It's a pride, a joy, a honor to receive today this medal. I would like also, if you allow me a few more minutes, Mr. Congressman, Mr. Presidents, I will take advantage of this circumstance to add a few remarks. I'm just back from Ukraine a few days ago, and not only from Ukraine, but from frontline. I was in Toretsk, where I saw the Ukrainian army counter-attacking and retaking some of the neighborhoods, some parts of the city, which the Russian army claimed to have taken control of. I was in Pokrovsk, embedded with the 155th Battalion of the Ukrainian Army. very dear to the heart of a Frenchman because it was trained, by the way, by France in part, and I was in Sumy. In these three cities, Toretsk, retaken by Ukraine, Pokrovsk, when the Ukrainian army is not in a defensive position these days, but offensive position, and Sumy, which was the victim of this rather unprecedented tragedy 2 weeks ago. In Sumy, the Ukrainian army is protecting the city. Not always, of course. We saw that, this terrible missile strike. The days I was there, one of the days I was there was 95 missiles and drones falling on the area. But nevertheless, Ukrainian army stands so firmly that it allows the city of Sumy to live, and to live in a relatively normal way. Toretsk is, part of it is destroyed. Pokrovsk is a ghost city, but Sumy is a living city continuing to live a normal life of a great metropole. This is due to the Ukrainian army, and what I want to say in this place, in the Congress of America, is that the army of Ukraine is not losing the war. The army of Ukraine is not at the edge of breaking. The army of Ukraine, Mr. Congressman, this is what I want to be witness of. This is what I beg you to convey outside of this place and in this place is an army of winners. They are not losers, they are winners. And I am an eyewitness in the Toretsk area, in the Sumy area, in Pokrovsk area of this fact. The second observation which I did in the recent days is that on front line, I was sometimes under heavy shelling. Sometimes it was nightmare. It was nightmare because if you counted well, you could count that when Ukrainian army did shoot one missile or bullet or whatever, the Russian army did shoot 10. 1 against 10. When you listen to the commanders with whom I shared part of my time, Ukrainian army did fight with 1 man against 5 or 6 on the other side. 5 or 6 assailants, Russians, North Koreans. On the other side, you had, against 5, you had 1. Why did Ukrainian army prevail? Why does she resist? Why did she retake Toretsk? Why does the Ukrainian army still defend Sumy? Because Ukrainian army is incredibly today professional. Because the Ukrainian army is today the best in Europe, that's true, and probably one of the best in the world. When you are able, 1 against 5, 1 bullet against 10, when you are able to hold the front, it means that you replace the number by the wisdom, by the sense of tactic and of strategy. This is what is Ukrainian army today. It is a model for the West. They use our weapons, by the way. They use our weapons, which we delivered sometimes, not all the time. They use more and more their own weapons, which are homemade. which are made in Ukraine. And this I saw it a lot. But sometimes they use our weapons. They use our weapons which we did not really know how to use because we were accustomed to a time of peace. We never thought that war could come back in Europe and in the US. They know. They put them into practice. And the Ukrainian army is a sort of virtuous, good school of the war of freedom against tyranny for the whole West. And what I mean to say is that, as you well know, the President of the United States recently wondered, let's say it this way, why President Zelensky did not say more often, thank you, which was, by the way, an ill-informed observation, because President Zelensky says thank you as often as he thinks and as he has to say. He says thank you all the time. But the point is not that one. When I see the Ukrainian army defending their borders and our borders, when I see the Ukrainian commanders asked why they combat, replying, we combat because we defend our home, but we combat also because we defend your borders and your home, my conclusion is that it is us, Europeans, it is us, Americans, who should say thank you to the Ukrainian people, to the Ukrainian army, and to the Ukrainian president, who is, I'm sorry to say that, but who is probably the most respectable chief of state in the Western world today. This is my second remark. And I would like to end with a last remark. I just alluded to this moment in the Oval Office, which was so embarrassing for a lot of us, if not all of us. It happens that I lived this moment. I was not in France. I was not in America. When this moment happened, when this encounter between the two presidents, President of the United States, President of Ukraine, happened, I was in Ukraine. And I was on front line. I was in Pokrovsk. I was with some of the soldiers of the army, which I just told you about. And it was a very strange and terrible moment. I was with a group of soldiers who expected this moment, who waited for it, who hoped for it. We were waiting 2 hours before in a bunker, buried in a deep bunker for this encounter. We had captured the Starlink connection, and we, all of us, connected computers to be sure not to miss any drop or any minute and a second of this blessed moment. It was so important. President of Ukraine, President of America. And we were there, underground, in this bunker, around our computers. And when the moment happened, I saw the soldiers with whom I was. Tough guys. Aged soldiers, not teenagers. They were 40, 50. They have a great experience of life and of war. All of them paid a high price to this war. And I saw them. During this moment, I saw them crying. In front of this image, I saw these tough men crying. And why did they cry? Because they did not expect that. Because they had such an admiration for America. Because America was their fatherland of heart. Because they had a fatherland which is Ukraine, in flesh and blood, but in spirit. They had another fatherland which was Europe, the free world in general. And they had such an admiration for the American dream and for the American state. And for them, it was more, it felt, it smelled, not exactly a betrayal, because it can be repaired, of course, and I hope it will be. And this other image which we all saw in the Vatican might become a reparation, a way to repair the other image. It might be a sort of apology to the Ukrainian people and to the Ukrainian president. But at this moment, these Ukrainian commanders and simple soldiers believed so much in America. They shared so much of the American creed. They had so much the belief that they were fighting for the same values which are embodied, incarnated in the American creed, that they cried. And I wanted to share that with you today, under the umbrella and in the shining shadow of Metropolitan Andrey Sheptytsky. And by the way, it will be my last word. I never understood very well why Andrey Sheptytsky, Metropolitan Andrey Sheptytsky, is not yet counted among the righteous among nations. I know that the case has been examined. I know that for the moment it has been put aside. But I know that those who judge at Yad Vashem, there is a long process. There can be a rejection and an appeal. It's a process. And what I want to tell you today, that now, strong of this medal, emboldened by the great honor you offered me today, I will fight for the entry of Metropolitan Andrey Sheptytsky in the holy circle of the righteous among nations. And we will make it, my dear friend James. Thank you very much.
Dear friends, we continue, and I'm pleased to introduce our next speaker, Mark Levin, Executive Vice Chairman and CEO of National Coalition Supporting Eurasian Jewry. Mark?
Somebody had to follow that, and I guess it's me. So I will do my best. I want to, a lot of people have been recognized so far, a lot of groups, a lot of neighbors and friends, and I guess, I want to add my thanks as well, first to the organizers of the event, Boris, Jim. We wouldn't be here without the two of you and the two organizations that have done so much. My good good friend, Rabbi Bleich, who's already been mentioned, is someone who's dedicated his life, work over the last 35 years, 36 years. And it's been my pleasure to have worked with him for all those 35 plus years. I want to recognize the members of Congress who have been here, but I also want to recognize my one more good friend, the ambassador of Ukraine, who has done an incredible job in the 4 years. And I think it's almost been 4 years to the day that you arrived in Washington. Before I get to the gist of what I want to say, you should know that the ambassador, I don't know if NCSJ was her first stop, but we were one of her first stops. But I think her first official event, if you want to understand the connection between the Ukrainian government, its Jewish citizens, and the Ukrainian and the American Jewish community, if it wasn't the first, it was one of the first events she hosted in the middle of the pandemic. It was to teach Americans how to properly cook borscht. And not only was it one form of borscht, I think there were two forms. And one was the Jewish version of borscht, which would have made my parents very happy. And Ambassador, you should know I still have the recipe. So I also want to extend my thanks to all of you, to the members of the American Jewish community, to the Ukrainian Canadian, Ukrainian American communities, but to all the Americans that are here, particularly for the support that everyone has given to Ukraine over the last 3 years. I was asked to give greetings on behalf of my organization, but also the organized American Jewish community. If you're not familiar with NCSEJ, or the National Coalition on Eurasian Jewry, we are the voice of the American Jewish community, working on behalf of the Jewish communities in what we still call the former Soviet Union and most of Eastern Europe. And I'm happy to see some of my colleagues here, both from the American Jewish organizations, but also the Ukrainian and American organizations. You know, Bernard talked about the ups and downs in the relationship between our communities. And yes, we've had ups and downs over the years. But if anything, what has happened in the past 3 years has only cemented the good and most important parts of the relationship that exists between our two communities. Yes, there are issues that divide us, but there is an issue today that unites not just our communities, but our country as a whole. And that is support for the Ukrainian people. And I am proud that my organization has stood with the Ukrainian people in defense of their country against the unwarranted and unjustified Russian invasion that didn't begin 3 years ago, but began 11 years ago. And I'm proud that NCSEJ and the organized American Jewish community continues to stand in solidarity today with the Ukrainian people. It is appropriate that we're meeting in the U.S. Capitol to present these awards. It's appropriate because what better place than the bastion of democracy and debate for more than 2 centuries to be here today? And who wasn't inspired by the words that we just heard? You know, just down the street is the National Archives of the United States. And on the front of that building, it's written, "The past is prologue," meaning history doesn't repeat itself, but there are many lessons to be learned from understanding history. And one of these lessons is not everyone has the courage to speak out against tyranny. It takes brave individuals to do that. And the other lesson, and it was mentioned earlier, and it's something that I said 2 months ago on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial marking the 3rd anniversary of the invasion, is that appeasement didn't work in 1938, and appeasement is not going to work today. And it's something that we, not just as Americans, but as citizens living in the free world, have to understand. We have to, the question I always ask people is, do we stand with the aggressor or do we stand shoulder to shoulder with the Ukrainian people? The choice should be clear. We stand with the people of Ukraine. we must also continue to speak honestly to power. We must follow the example set by our two honorees and by Andrey Sheptytsky. Andrey Sheptytsky was part of a very small number of individuals throughout Europe and around the world who were willing to sacrifice everything to save Jewish lives from Hitler's killing machine. And I want to underline this. There may be hundreds, if not thousands, of the righteous who have been recognized. But think about that. Think of the tens of millions of people who lost their lives during the Holocaust and World War II. And think of the handful of individuals who are willing to stand up, sacrifice everything to try to save lives. Andrey Sheptytsky was willing to shelter Jews. He wrote Pope Pius, alerting him to mass murders taking place in Ukraine, and he urged his own congregants not to support the Nazis' elimination of Ukrainian Jews. That took courage. He was a man of valor and conviction. Our two honorees are people of valor and conviction. Both have spoken out against modern-day atrocities. Both have challenged authoritarian and totalitarian regimes. Both are defenders of human rights, and both are willing to speak honestly to power. Bernard-Henri Lévy, Lina Kostenko are worthy successors to individuals like Metropolitan Sheptytsky and others. I am honored to be here tonight representing NCSEJ and my community as these two worthy people receive this prestigious award. So thank you very much.
Dear friends, unfortunately, the health of the esteemed Lina Kostenko doesn't allow her to join us here in Washington today, but she kindly welcoming speech, which was read by her grandfather Yaroslava. Please turn on the recording. Granddaughter, sorry.
Дуже дякую за несподівану нагороду в такий важкий час. Ви, можливо, знаєте, що я політичний біжутерій не ношу. Але нагорода імені Шептицького – це особлива нагорода. Це знак солідарності, знак взаєморозуміння, якоїсь високої причетності до найшляхетніших людських цінностей. Через це я приймаю цю нагороду з глибокою вдячністю. Пробачте, що не змогла до вас приїхати, але, як хтось сказав, душі світу, як дзвони, одні далекі, інші близькі. Ми ж одне одного чуємо крізь всі ці ракети, шахеди і всю цю війну. Кам'ю казав, що світ поділяється на чуму і на її жертв. Головне – не стати на бік чуми, але і не стати жертвами. Бо чума, здавалося ж, знищена, але її вібріони розрослися, вони збереглися, розрослися і зараз загрожують всьому людству, в яких зараз виникає якісь нові форми фашизму, який обступає людство. Я зараз закінчую книжку нову. Шукаю оптимізму в собі. Бо люди ж хочуть втіхи, люди хочуть розради. І ось написала такі оптимістичні рядки. Оце такі ми в Господа щасливці. Ми обраний народ. Нас обирають вбивці. Знайоме, правда? Колись було таке гасло радянське: пролетарі всіх країн, єднайтеся. Думаю, на часі наше гасло. Порядні люди всіх країн, єднаймося, цим переможемо. Дякую.
Lina Kostenko, the Yule and our future. Dear friends and colleagues, distinguished guests, first of all, my great gratitude to the Jewish Confederation of Ukraine, as well as the Ukrainian Jewish Encounter, for awarding me the Metropolitan Andrey Sheptytsky Medal. This is a great honor, and this is an unexpected award for me, which takes on special significance in these tragic times for Ukraine and Israel. When and how did the Jewish world enter my life? Through empathy, through compassion. My childhood fell on World War II. We lived on Trukhanov Island. It was a beautiful part of Kyiv, opposite the monument St. Volodymyr. As I remember today, my little friend Yosha is walking to school along the banks of the Dnipro River and singing at the top of his lungs. The war forced us to leave that corner of paradise. The island was actually destroyed during the battles for Kyiv. When we returned there again, there were very few people on the island, and Yoshi was not among them. And then we heard the terrible news. Yoshi was shot along with other Jews in Babyn Yar. Before that, in school, children did not even think about who is of what nationality. So the understanding of Yoshi's identity came with his death. For the rest of my life, I have not been able to understand how a little boy singing on the golden sand on the banks of the Dnipro River could be shot. I remember another voice from my childhood. I had a record at home with an old Jewish song, 80 Yor, 80 years. I did not understand the words, but I was struck by the sad, deep male voice in contrast to the light, bright melody. After the war, an action called the Fight Against Cosmopolitanism made a heavy impression on me. It was 1948. Some of my friends were Ukrainian Jewish writers, and I suddenly saw a void forming around them. They were avoided, not greeted. They were declared cosmopolitans without relatives, enemies of the Soviet regime. I continued to communicate with them as a matter of principle, trying to overcome their vacuum of loneliness, while remembering the immense loneliness experienced by repressed Ukrainian writers that had just been called bourgeois nationalists. And then there were the 60s when I entered literature. A few short years of publications, and then 16 years of prohibition. For us, who were then the generation of the 60s, the Jewish question was extremely important, just like the Crimean Tatar or Polish question. Knowing from our own experience what imperial and totalitarian violence against peoples is, we also defended the identity of these persecuted peoples. It was all the more painful today to see how not only Russia, but also many in the West ignore the rights of the Crimean Tatar people deported in 1944, a people for whom Crimea is the only motherland. In those 1960s, my good acquaintance was Anatoly Kuznetsov, who lived close to Babyn Yar, and saw that tragedy through the eyes of a child. He sent me a version of his novel about Babyn Yar, not distorted by censorship. At that time, I was translating Jewish poets. It was still completely impossible to imagine that an independent Ukraine would ever emerge. But we saw this long-dreamed-of free motherland as a European state, where each nation was to have its own voice, its own form of cultural existence. In this regard, I want to remember my great friend Ivan Zyuba, who we miss so very much today, and who also received this honorary medal at one time. That Ivan Zyuba, a Donetsk resident, one of the most prominent dissidents of the 1960s, died on the 22nd of February 2022, literally on the eve of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, as if refusing to see what would happen to his Donetsk region, to his Ukraine. He was buried on the day the war began, as if killed by the war. Actually, it was Zyuba who first spoke about Babyn Yar on the 29th of September 1966 as a common tragedy and common memory of Jews and Ukrainians. He said this in the atmosphere of state anti-Semitism, with the help of which, after the catastrophe of the Holocaust, the Soviet regime continued its persecution, denying Jews even the right to mourn their dead, and denying Ukrainians the right to even remember the catastrophe of the Holodomor. In September of this year, an exhibition of paintings depicting the historical dramas of Jews and Ukrainians will open in Chicago. The author of the paintings, Yohanan Petrovsky Stern, an amazing example of Jewish-Ukrainian intellectual and artistic symbiosis, calls this cycle of his works confronting catastrophes. In fact, each catastrophe is unique. But we, together with the Jews, the Poles, and with the three Baltic peoples, are the peoples of the bloody lands, the lands between Hitler and Stalin, as Timothy Snyder wrote about it. This is one of the main keys to our understanding. In fact, anti-Semitism is very similar in its characteristics to Ukrainophobia. We are two peoples who have been denied the right to exist in various ways for centuries, the right to have their own state, the right to remember their own tragedies. Ukrainians had to fight for decades just for the right to recognize the Holodomor as the genocide of the Ukrainian people, although even Raphael Lemkin, the author of the concept of genocide, had cited the Holodomor as an example of genocide. And the matter is still not over. A symbolic fact, it was during this war that Europe began to widely recognize the Holodomor as genocide. In other words, it seems that a modern genocide is needed in order to finally see the genocide in its macabre reflections in the past. Therefore, protecting the memory of these tragedies inevitably becomes part of our identity. In this regard, we can and should learn from the Jews how to implement a resilient and consistent strategy for protecting this memory. I also want to mention Chernobyl. In the 1990s, I worked for over 10 years as part of the historical and cultural expedition studying the heritage of Ukrainian Polisia, which was destroyed by radiation. Chernobyl is also one of the ancient centers of Hasidism in Ukraine. Menachem Nahum, the founder of the Chernobyl dynasty of Tzaddiks, is buried here. There was a magnificent large synagogue here, converted into a military registration and enlistment office in Soviet times. The rusty red star on the balcony reminds us of this absurdity. A local resident told me a terrifying story. There is still a ditch there where executed Jews were thrown, and in the midst of that apocalypse, a young Jewish woman lay in the ditch with her two small dead sons huddled against her. I had a scarf on my shoulders made by a local factory with a black on white cross pattern. In those days, such scarves were called 20th century because of this pattern. I thought about this eerie symbol, a mother with murdered children as an emblem of the 20th century, standing in that deserted synagogue with broken windows. Cold silence, without prayers. Only a swallow flew under the vault like a pendulum of time, drawing some ancient, mysterious writings. My life unfolded between two world wars, the second and today, the third. As a child, on the 22nd of June 1941, I heard the bombing of German planes on the outskirts of Kyiv. At dawn, bombers arrive at dawn to stop human life. And on the 24th of February 2022, also at dawn, Russian bombers flew over Kyiv. In the past, death came from the west. Now, death has come from the east. And just when Ukraine was standing up, when Ukraine was crystallizing its European identity, this death came to prevent this identity from taking hold. And in fact, the Ukrainian state, like the Israeli state, are in a very similar position in this regard. Again and again, they have to fight survival, the right to be, the right to choose their future. Allow me, taking this unique opportunity, to thank a special person whom you are awarding with me, Bernard-Henri Lévy. We heard your voice when you spoke on the Maidan on the 9th of February 2014, calling yourself Ukrainian. We heard your voice when you spoke on the Maidan for the second time on the 2nd of March of the same year, saying, Europe must protect Ukraine. Europe must become the guarantor of the borders of your nation and the freedom of your cities. You called Ukraine the guardian fortress of Europe. You also said that Putin's next enemy after Ukraine is Europe. 11 years have passed since those speeches of yours, and today we can all see how prophetic your vision was. Today Ukraine is defending Europe, and Europe is defending Ukraine. and this is the only guarantee for the salvation of the democratic system at the moment. The world is small. At that time on the Maidan, you were translated by the Parisian journalist Halia Ackerman, our great friend. By the way, she also went to Chernobyl with us. My poems were published in your magazine La Règle du Jeu in 2015, dedicated to the Maidan. I also would like to thank Andrei Glucksmann, your friend, who is no longer with us, but who from the very beginning of Ukraine's struggle for its European future, back in 2004, called for solidarity with Ukraine, striking us with his piercing understanding of the situation and exceptional passion of thought. When the outstanding philosopher and your teacher Jacques Derrida died in the same year, 2004, I was for some reason so incredibly sad. I wrote a poem about the friction of everyone with everyone, about the impossibility of meeting and the chaos of the modern world. But thanks to the great figure Metropolitan Andrey Sheptytsky, thanks to the Jewish Confederation of Ukraine and the Ukrainian Jewish meeting, we have been able to meet in a way. And even if this is a virtual meeting, because the war does not allow me to be in this hall right now, I'm still with you, with my thoughts and the voice of my dear granddaughter Yaroslava Francesca. And this is the highest dimension of meeting with you. It's a deep understanding, deep empathy, deep solidarity. Finally, I will recall the motto of the Polish November Uprising of 1830-1831, for your and our freedom. The philosophy of this motto: a nation can be truly free only if it is surrounded by free nations themselves. The drama that we are experiencing today forces us to say, for your and our dead, because this is the noblest dimension of memory, when you remember the sorrow of close people. Also for your and our future, so that the suffering and trials of our peoples in these years become a chronicle of courage, responsibility, love of freedom, so that the children of our peoples can sing on the banks of the Jordan and Dnipro without fear of being killed. Thank you again. Kyiv, 30th of April, 2025.
Dear friends, I should stress that it was a wise decision to choose Lina Kostenko as the awardee of Metropolitan Sheptytsky Medal, and it was a decision of Jim Temerty, and he would like to say several words about Lina Kostenko. Please.
Thank you, Boris. Before I do say anything, I would like to acknowledge a gentleman that's in the room here with us. He's a Ukrainian soldier by the name of Mykola Melnik, who's here. He is disabled and is being treated in the United States.
Without your clock, don't touch. I'm talking about.
Микола, ми тобі дуже вдячні за те, що ти робиш для нашу Україну. Mykola, we are very grateful for what you are doing for our Ukraine, and we deeply connect with you for the sacrifice that you have endured. Thank you for being here. Because I don't have much to say about Lina, I'll explain that in a second. I will say something else instead. And just by way of connecting to something I heard from Bernard-Henri Lévy. What an amazing speaker, don't you think? I can speak like that sometimes, but no, not tonight. This is, he said something about how the Ukrainian soldiers, how the army was able to withstand being outnumbered 5-1 or even more. And I heard him say that part of that was attributed to professionalism, and I think he used the word like wisdom. which reminded me of a story I heard just a few weeks ago when a gentleman was speaking to an aged professor from Dnipro, and things were looking grim in Ukraine. And so this fellow asked the professor, he said, this is a true story, it's not a joke. He said, well, what is going to happen to us? Will we survive? And the professor thought, and he said, you know, I have learned that in evolution, species adapt to the dangers and to the difficult circumstances around themselves in order to survive. And we have adapted. And our strength is intelligence. Against the enemy to the north. So, about Lina Kostenko, look, I had written introductory remarks. It's not easy putting a thing like this together when one is in Toronto and Boris and his team is 10,000 kilometers away. So the coordination was not perfect. We'll get better. Hopefully next time we're all together in one place doing these things. So I was to say some words before you saw that video, but having seen the video and having heard so much about Lina Kostenko already from Ambassador Markarova, from Bernard-Henri Lévy, and even from Boris, and thinking about what I have here, I don't intend to take your time with my remarks. I will just ask you to join me once again in a round of applause for this amazing 95. I spoke with her yesterday, her and her daughter, this amazing lady. So, Lina, we thank you.
I am pleased to introduce our next speaker, William Daroff, CEO and of the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations.
Thank you very much. At a time when the world too often fractures along old lines of hatred, it's inspiring to gather here in the spirit of memory, unity, and hope. It's an honor to be here with you this evening for the 2025 presentation of the Metropolitan Andrey Sheptytsky Medal. I'm privileged to speak this evening on behalf of the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations, which is the umbrella organization of North American Jewry, including 50 organizations, including NCSEJ, and we heard earlier from my colleague Mark Levin, and his chair, Alan Cronstad, is also here, a great leader of our people. It's especially meaningful for our community to join in honoring those who, through courage and conscience, have advanced the cause of human dignity. Tonight, we honor two extraordinary voices of conscience, the eminent philosopher and public intellectual, Bernard-Henri Lévy, and the great Ukrainian poet, Lina Kostenko. Their fearless advocacy of justice through thought, word, and public action echoes the legacy of Metropolitan Sheptytsky, who stood against hatred and violence, even in the darkest moments of the 20th century. At a time when anti-Semitism and war imperil human dignity, we must uplift those who speak with moral clarity and unwavering integrity. We express our deep solidarity with the people of Ukraine, with Ukrainian Jewish community, who have endured such unimaginable hardship. Bernard-Henri Lévy stands as one of the towering moral figures of our time. With brilliance, courage, and unyielding conscience, he has brought the cause of the oppressed to the center of Europe and to the world's moral awareness. From Sarajevo to Kyiv, from Mosul to Mariupol, he has been a relentless witness and a fearless advocate for human dignity. Through his words, his films, and his unflagging public voice, he has made indifference impossible and compelled action where silence might have prevailed. As a proud Jew, his writings capture so much of our shared ethos, constantly and consistently standing against the rise of anti-Semitism and the global campaign to delegitimize the state of Israel. That he receives this honor tonight here in the heart of the democratic world is both fitting and urgent. As demonstrated by his persistent and poignant latest book, Israel Alone, which I encourage you to read, is a quick and important read. His voice is more vital now than ever before. We extend our deep thanks to Boris and the Jewish Confederation of Ukraine, and to James and the Ukrainian Jewish Encounter, and of course to Ezra Friedlander for organizing this meaningful event. May it strengthen the bonds between our communities and renew our shared commitment to justice, memory, and human dignity. May we draw strength from those we honor tonight, and may we each be guardians of memory, justice, and peace. Thank you all very much.
And this is how I was saved.
The process of integrating children of various cultures, making Jewish children inconspicuous to the ever-searching Gestapo, required discretion and understanding.
I had to learn how to cross myself and all of the other things that a 7-year-old would normally, living in that culture, know so that I could pass.
Daniel Timchina was the head of our orphanage, and he was very careful not to show others that we are Jewish.
The Metropolitan used his many personal connections and the wide network of his church in support of this integration and concealment process.
This is picture of Rabbi Kahane, who was saved with his family in the monastery of Sheptytsky, and after the war became the chief rabbi of the Polish army, and later he became chief rabbi here in Israel of the Air Force.
There were 2 other Jewish boys in Univ at the time, Oded, and whose name was Dorko, and Daniel, who's Adam Daniel Rotfeld. This is a picture of Daniel. I call him Daniel. He's known as Adam Daniel Rotfeld. This is a photograph that he sent me some years later when he met with the Pope. And he indicated in his letter that he spoke about me with the Pope, and the Pope sent his blessings, and that he thanked in our name the church for doing what it did.
He was exposed. He was a most courageous man. He was, first of all, his humanity was such. He was almost a saint, a sanctity about this man. Plus, he endangered himself. He endangered the entire church, if you like, who kept us because it was at his recommendation. So he is the head of it all, and he in his own library, he kept a Rabbi Dr. Kahane, behind the wall, behind the books. And when they talk about collaboration or cooperation with the Germans, I mean, what sort of a thing is that if the Gestapo visited him sometimes once a week, sometimes once a fortnight, and for inspection, to see, they looked around. For what? For whom? For the Jews, of course.
I am the representative of all these children who were saved by Sheptytsky.
Metropolitan Sheptytsky is the only head of church, only one who during that time, during the darkest hours in history, had the courage to oppose the regime, to oppose the fact, I mean, who was writing letters to Himmler and to Hitler and to Wächter? Who? But he, no other head of state.
By saving the life of a 7-year-old boy, They saved my 3 children, my 7 grandchildren, and an unknown number of worlds yet to come. It pains me that my people have not yet seen fit to honor Archbishop Sheptytsky. That in no way detracts from his honor, it detracts from ours.
Dear friends, before finishing our today's event, I would like to introduce you grandsons of one righteous among the nations. His name is Volk. He was one of leaders of UPA who saved Jews during the World War II, and he did it in the Dnipropetrovsk region. And I would like, where are Mr. Vovchuk? Are you with us? Yeah. This is grandsons of this hero. He accepted by Yad Vashem. And Bernard, I will do all my best with you to push them. I will tell you more in details. Well, I know the situation very well with Sheptytsky. And Jim, closing remarks. Floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Boris. Thank you, Ina. Thank you for whomever else was part of your team to have put this together. And thank you, Raya. Well, of course, what do you think? Yes. And thank you, Bernard, for such an outstanding moment. Anyway, I don't have much more to say other than it's wonderful that you came, you listened, you heard, and you took something in. And I am encouraged to have heard Bernard-Henri Lévy commit himself to do something about recognizing Andrey Sheptytsky. You could do worse than to pray to Metropolitan Andrey Sheptytsky. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
And let's have a photo. Bernard, let's have a photo with